A narcissist doesn't have the capacity to love unconditionally. They can only love conditionally. So whether you're with a narcissistic partner or a narcissistic parent, there's always a condition of your love. If you do something for me, I will love you. If you do what I tell you to do, I will love you. If you have something I need from you, I will love you. So there's always conditions. They don't have the capacity to love unconditionally.
You can't park here.
First of all, how are you doing? And where are you hailing from today, Iman?
How am I doing is a loaded question because I just got some bad news from my mail forwarder because I have a Florida mailing address, have all my ID and registration through Florida. And I just renewed my car registration online about 10 days ago. So I've been waiting for the little sticker to come in the mail. So I saw that I received the mail yesterday and I generated the shipment. And they charge a lot of money to forward your mail to you. So then this morning I wake up and there's another letter from Okaloosa County. And I called down there and she said, "Oh, yeah, that's your registration. It didn't make it into the shipment package." So
I understand that turmoil. I'm going through it. I bought a second vehicle to resell, and Arizona is now doing this weird thing with e-titles. So you get
Florida does that too. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how am I going to sell the truck without a title? Nobody wants to buy a truck without it. Oh, well, you just give them this special form that we've signed in front of a DMV agent, and we'll get you on your. And I'm like, no. Everyone who's looked at the truck is like, what the fuck? There's no way I'm signing that or bringing it. You're going to just give me the keys, and then I'm supposed to go to DMV and trust that they have a title. What if the whole system goes down? What if it gets hacked? So I went in there 2 days later and demanded I need a title. But I know the struggle with the DMV, and Arizona has it pretty fast. Like, it's pretty easy and convenient, and they don't make you wait very long. It's efficient, but I do not like not having a title. It makes me very, very uneasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ordered a paper copy of mine from Florida, but today I am actually physically in the state of Indiana.
Okay.
Southern Indiana.
And that is home? Is that home?
It has been since 1997, but I'm a native New Yorker, 30 years, born and raised in New York State and New York City. So I still consider myself a New Yorker, although I would never go back there.
All right. So for those of you that don't know, Iman is someone that I have known for years now via TikTok, via the internet. I guess you could say we are internet friends. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. I knew when we started this podcast, I had a list of people in my head, and this was definitely one of them. I've live streamed with her before, and you guys are in for a real treat. But I just want to say there is a little bit of trigger warning. As we share some stories today, there will be talk of physical, mental, emotional abuse. And if this is hits too close to home to you and you're not ready to listen to a heavier episode, hit pause, come back later when you're ready. I think it is going to have a lot of merit and value, and I hope that it reaches the right people that definitely need to hear about this right now.
Yes. So who we're talking to right now is Discarded Wife on TikTok. And what are your other handles, Iman? Your social media handles?
That's really the only one that I'm using right now. I have started a YouTube channel several years ago under that same handle, but I have nothing posted on there as of yet. So I'm not very active posting. I'm more of a consumer of social media. But I plan to change that in the future. I really need to focus on getting my YouTube channel started. And that is actually Discarded Wife also.
Everyone, this is Iman, Discarded Wife. What we're going to be talking about today is definitely what Kyla mentioned, also escaping narcissistic abuse, rebuilding life after that abuse, and how van life intersects and can empower you on the other side of that abuse.
I have been reading Iman's book, I Will Ruin Your Life. Let me put it right in front of me because I have it. It's blurring it, but it is a memoir. I'll let her discuss it a little bit more, and I have highlighted some passages that I kind of want to touch on. But how does all of this tie into van life? I know you're like, isn't this a van life podcast? What the heck does this have to do with that? If you want to tell us your current living situation, how you're living, and how van life has influenced you or given you some tools to make things work for now.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. I know it is a little bit off topic of what you usually talk about on your podcast, but I do think that it's very relevant because as I began to consume van life videos starting back in 2018, I noticed that an awful lot of people who were either forced into this lifestyle or chose this lifestyle or accepted this lifestyle were victims of abuse. Divorce, broken homes, uh, domestic issues. And as an older woman, I was discarded by my husband. I was 48, so I'll be 58 this year. But at the time, I was 48, and I was not in a good financial position. And I kind of in the back of my head knew that when he walked out on me, that I was eventually going to be headed in that direction of living in my car. Even in perfect circumstances with two people, it's really hard to survive in sticks and bricks housing these days. And as an older person who was discarded later in life, to me, it feels nearly impossible. And so I began selling, beginning in 2018, selling all my furniture, selling anything I had that was valuable, and I didn't have a lot. And I started little by little buying what I would need for the van. I already had a minivan, so one week I would buy a cot, and then I would buy a sleeping bag and camping stove and a toilet. And I little by little started collecting everything I needed for a no-build van in my Dodge Grand Caravan. And then in 2019, my son ended up coming to live with me in a little contract house that I'm buying on contract in a very poor neighborhood in southern Indiana. And I was prepared to just walk away from it, just to walk away, give it back to the owners and just walk away. And my son came to stay with me, which was supposed to be temporary. And I asked him to come live with me, by the way. It wasn't the other way around. I asked him to come and stay with me. And he was working for a traveling carnival, and he was planning on going back to that when they restarted the carnival season again. And then the lockdowns happened. And he ended up not being able to go back to the carnival. They didn't have a carnival season that year, and he had already taken a job in fast food locally here. And what started out as something temporary with him staying with me turned into something very permanent with him saying, I like the stability here, because he's had a rough go of it. He left home when he was 17. He's been in and out of the system, with legal issues, and he's been homeless, and he's been couch surfing, and so he can't really make it on his own either. So I kind of decided, okay, we'll stick together. I'll keep this van life thing on the back burner for when, you're ready to go. But then we ended up with no running water in the house. And then a year later, we ended up with our air conditioning going out, our central air. And then we ended up with our heat or furnace going out. So we live in a house with no running water, no heat, no air conditioning. And in southern Indiana, that's not fun because it's hot and humid in the winter, in the summer, cold in the winter. And there's no windows in the house except for 2 rooms. The rooms that we basically have made into our bedrooms.
And these extra amenities, you've decided not to continue to, contribute to the fund of repairing them because it's just too much money at this point, right? We're looking at thousands and thousands of dollars, if not more.
We're looking at least 5 to 10 for the water because it's an underground leak or it's under the house somehow and there's no basement or crawl space. We're looking at least $12,000 for a central AC unit, and you're looking at least the same for a new furnace, because everything, the air conditioner I had repaired before, and the guy told me, he said, I'm not going to be able to do anything with this air conditioner after this year because this model is too old. It's from like the 1980s or 90s. It's very old. Same thing with the furnace. So it would require having a brand new install put in, which, so altogether with all the issues, you're looking at the repairs costing more than the house is worth. Because people always say to me, well, why don't you just sell the house and move? Well, first of all, I don't own the house yet, so it's not mine to sell. And if it did sell, it only, last time I had it appraised, it was like less than $40,000. So we're not talking about a wonderful, great home here that somebody would be dying to get into. And it would give me enough money maybe to buy some food and go out to dinner for, but, it wouldn't, like, with my credit issues, with my employment, level and not meeting admission requirements into most rentals, I know I would be wasting my time even trying to get a rental. So selling, even if I could sell the house, it wouldn't help because there's still.
And so this puts you into a van life situation, right?
It will. And, the reason we're holding on to the house as long as we can is because my 36-year-old son is not exactly thrilled with the idea of sleeping in the same bed with me in a van. He's not into it. So if I go into the van with me and my dog, that basically leaves him and his dog homeless. And, I know Kyla did it in the pilot, you and Andrew and Gunnar, that's a big deal. But, you're an intimate partner.
Well,
I
that's
think
my husband versus like you and your son. That's a completely different relationship.
Yeah.
And you need your own space for sure.
Yeah, he's not, we have stayed in the van together before. When we went to Florida, he slept across the front seat, and that was very uncomfortable for him. So as a long-term, solution for us living together in a minivan, it's not doable. Now, if I had a bigger van and I could build like him, like a little separate bunk, that would be a different story. He probably would stay there with me, but so that's why we're holding on. We're holding on to this sinking ship. We're going down with the ship with this house.
But you did do a trial run with the minivan, just you for a few months.
I did. Right? I did during the pandemic. Coincidentally, I had been teaching English online for Chinese companies, and it was a pretty good gig at the time. But then, coincidentally, around the time that the COVID started, the Chinese government had made some changes in the regulations and the hours and amount of time that they allowed children to participate in those kind of online learning platforms. So the Chinese market pretty much dried up overnight. And I started doing Instacart and food delivery services, which is not very busy in this area. So I had taken the van, I took my dog, I had all the stuff that I had accumulated for the van, put everything in the van and went down and stayed down in St. Petersburg, Clearwater area. And Instacart was busy down there. I was able to do fairly decently. But then it got too hot to remain in Florida. Like once April came and it started to become too hot.
I can vouch for
that. So you got the skills. I honed the skills of van life, and now you can take those skills with you anywhere you go. And so the facing of maybe losing a house or turning away from that kind of life and not wanting to pay the mortgage anymore and not wanting to deal with fixing the air conditioning and all that is not as scary because you have the skill set under your belt already, right?
Oh, I'm not worried about going into van life. To me, I would do it tomorrow if it wasn't for my son in the situation that I'm in because of him. I loved being in the van so much that the day I arrived back in Indiana, I walked in the house, said hello to my son, and then I went back out and slept in the van again in front of the house. Me and Charlie, my little dog, we weren't ready to go back into the house yet. I think it's not sad. It's not depressing. At least it doesn't have to be. Right. One of the reasons I started following Kyla was because of her upbeat attitude with all that she was going through. I thought, I understand what she's going through, but I really liked how you made everything so positive, and this is how we're making it work. And I think I kind of went into it with the same attitude. It wasn't like, oh no, I have to live in the car. What am I going to do? It was like, I'm going to live in my car.
Yeah.
I was like, I can do this. And because of having lived van life, prior to our water going out, my son was really crying. He was upset and crying when the water department came and shut it off, because we had like such a big leak that they had to shut it off. And I said, you know what? No problem. We got this. We got 5-gallon buckets. We got plastic bags. We got wood chips and sawdust and horse pellets, and we got Planet Fitness. And I said, we got this. And, we've been doing it 4 years now, and it's like nothing to us. It's a little bit more work. I've got to go out once a week and fill up my 5-gallon bottles. Fortunately, we have a water kiosk here in the city, which is 25 cents a gallon. Fortunately, we have 2 Planet Fitness locations. So it's just a little bit more work, washing dishes in a bucket like grandma used to do, So my water footprint is really low, which I think I'm kind of proud of that.
So you're taking a lot of the van life skills and applying them to this very unique situation. And I have never heard of anyone else doing this in an urban setting. There's people that live off grid or they're homesteading and they're like, I don't have electricity or running water. But this is something that wasn't necessarily by choice. Obviously, you didn't want your water shut off. You would like to have AC, but you use these skills. You're basically doing everything that we're doing in a van, just in your home that doesn't have water and heat anymore. And I thought that was a super fascinating crossover for this episode. But we don't have to harp on that too much. I just wanted to make that connection for everybody. More importantly, let's get into what, like you said earlier, we already kind of touched on it. What got you to this point, and what gets a lot of women to this point financially?
Well, I was married to a personality disordered individual who, after 8 years of marriage, discarded me as if I had never existed in his life. It was like poof, no responsibility, no accountability. That all goes along with the disorder. Now, I had just completed my master's degree. I was in the middle of completing my master's degree at the time that I was discarded. And a lot of people don't understand why, if I have a master's degree, am I suffering so badly? Number one, I don't recommend going back to school as an older person, because when you get a degree without experience in a field, that degree doesn't matter. They want to see experience. And second of all, the PTSD that hit me like a ton of bricks made it really impossible for me to even leave the house for the first year. I was so hyper vigilant just trying to leave the house. So, little by little, my ability to function in the world normally was eroded away. And when I did try to go back out, working retail jobs, I got paid $9 an hour with 20 hours a week. You can't live on that. So the financial situation of being discarded by someone you were married to, who does not contribute anything to me financially anymore, and acts like it's not his problem. That's pretty much what got me where I am.
I underlined a few things here. So the fact that you said, I had PTSD after this, like there's a mental health component to this where it's not a visible scar, but it leaves you just completely at a standstill as a functioning human. You said this is just in the preface of the book. A world filled with fear and nightmares, hypervigilance, fear of people, loss of interest in things I once loved, loss of interest in life, weight gain, health problems, and a general inability to function in the world, otherwise known as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. What I didn't know was why. I would realize later that I was suffering from PTSD due to narcissistic personality disorder abuse. And this is just your memoir. We're not doing like professional psychology medical advice here. But if anyone listening is feeling like that and you don't know why, keep listening, because it's going to get deep.
It's a real thing, and your feelings are valid, and you don't have to feel that way, and you don't deserve to feel that way. So yeah, keep listening. And I kind of want to add in, I don't want to take the emphasis off of Iman at all, but this topic is such a near and dear topic to my heart. Not going to get emotional. I'm in van life for a very similar reason. I most of you know this. If you don't know this, welcome to the show. But I am a survivor of a second-degree attempted murder. My son's father attacked me when my son was like 4 months old. Like it was a very gruesome, horrible thing. I ended up with multiple surgeries and over 300 stitches in the hospital, almost dying afterwards. To crawl back to individuality and being able to support myself after that was, I didn't think I would make it. I don't think many people thought I would make it, and I had a lot of help. And so I urge anyone who's in a situation of abuse right now, whether you realize it or not, if you're feeling like this is hitting home or resonating in some way, reach out to me, reach out to Kyla, reach out. Maybe we can help you get connected to the right resources, because if it wasn't for those resources, I wouldn't be here today. So I just wanted to say that so that everyone has, we are open
a little bit of background. I luckily didn't suffer. Oh, hi, Gunner. I luckily didn't suffer. The emotional support animals are coming out now. Oh, you're stretching. I didn't suffer too much from like abuse in romantic relationships, luckily, as I got older. And I think that was because my mother was really the abusive component in my life and my upbringing, which is unfortunate because while you're developing and shaping, you have someone beating you down every step of the way. Just like getting ready for school, walking into the room, that's what you're doing with your hair. Getting dressed for ballet, I can see the cellulite under your butt cheek. I was 80 pounds soaking wet. Like, just like crazy that like any parental figure that's supposed to be loving is just absolutely horrific. And I think that, her mental illnesses and her outburst, it was always like my fault. It was always put on me. You're the one that made me behave this way. I don't want to yell. You're making me yell. I didn't want to throw that. Like with someone that has those characteristics, it's always you. It's never them. So if that sounds familiar, I can't diagnose anybody, but maybe get away from them now. And the only reason I knew that type of personality and those type of character traits because she put me on a bunch of pharmaceuticals because I was the crazy one. She put me on, I had to go talk to a therapist because I was the one that was promiscuous and acting out. And like it was me doing all this to cause her to act that way. And it was not vice versa. So when I was around 16 years old, I had a therapist that said, listen, when you're 18 years old, you need to get away from that woman and stay away from her. Like, she's like, you don't want to go into foster care. You don't want to be emancipated. Like, you're doing ballet. You're smart. You have good grades. She's like, she was straight up with me. She's like, you don't want to go into the foster care system. Just put up with this psychopath and get out when you're 18. And that was the first time an adult had really talked to me like, yeah, we know she's messed up. Like, this isn't okay, but there's nothing we can do. So I think
therapists tell me the same thing. We have similar backgrounds with our parents being out of their minds unknowingly. So yes, if it wasn't for those people who came to us and said, listen, this sucks. It shouldn't be your responsibility right now, but it is. And you're going to have to deal with it until you can be on your own. It's not a fun time, but if you ever felt like you've constantly been called the black sheep and you can't understand what you're doing wrong, that might be a sign.
And I know we had like a little pre-meeting thing a couple days ago. I wanted to keep it fresh for the pod, but just referring back to that private conversation, if that's okay. We are from different generations, and what really struck me and made me so sad is that generations before me, I guess technically I'm considered a millennial, there was no one to go and talk to about it. You weren't supposed to talk about abuse. There was most certainly no like a mental or emotional abuse. Like if you're not getting hit, you're fine. So there was no validation, and that type of abuse from a narcissist is so invalidating by nature, because that's the ploy, that's the tactic. So you really feel like you're losing your mind. Like you feel like everything they're telling you is true. So yeah, Iman, sorry. We didn't want to steal your thunder here.
Oh no, you're fine. As a Gen X, you're a millennial. I'm Gen X. I had two silent Gen parents and then a boomer stepmother. So I was thrown out at 18. So you got very good advice to leave at 18, because we were just thrown out at 18, whether we were abused or not. That's a Gen X thing. But I also had a lot of physical, mental, verbal abuse from my stepmother, which it's interesting how, Kyla, you got the advice and you learned enough to stay away from this type of abuse in romantic relationships, whereas I feel that I was conditioned into it. I feel that having witnessed and lived with 14 years from the age of 5 to the age of 18, I was conditioned to stay in these toxic environments and try to make it work and do your best and take the blame because you're being blamed for everything. So I think it's interesting how it's played out with the different generations. The millennials are, they're learning and they're staying away from, the millennials made it cool to go no contact with your parents, but Gen Xers were doing it way before. We were doing it before the internet, so people didn't know we were doing it. And like you were saying, we didn't have anybody who believed us, even trying to go to authority figures. I went to the assistant principal of my high school, and she said, "Why did you run away from home?" I said, "Because I'm being abused." And she looked me dead in the face and said, "I don't believe you. I don't believe you." And that's a mandatory reporter. That's a mandatory reporter. So we just kind of learned how to keep our mouths shut, don't talk about it, just deal with it, make the best you can, make it work, try harder. And and I think it's great that these conversations are coming out now, because they need to be heard. Because at 48 years old, being discarded by a person with a personality disorder, and I had never heard of a personality disorder before, and I considered myself a fairly intelligent, well-educated person, there's something wrong with that. There's definitely something wrong with that.
What was your life like? Like, what led to the marriage? What signs were there that he had narcissistic personality disorder? Like, obviously, you didn't know what it was, but when you met your ex-husband, I think you mentioned you were abroad and you were in Egypt, and you had moved back to the States. You've gotten married. Like, what did that all look
No,
like?
we got married. We got married in Egypt. I met him when I was planning to move to Egypt. I basically had been going through it during the 2008 financial crisis with working minimum wage jobs, trying to make it work here, and I was like, I'm done. I'm leaving, going somewhere else. And so I think I sold my car, and that was all the money I had. And I'm like, I'm going to start over with this. Lost my house to foreclosure um, at the time, and we met online. It wasn't a dating site or anything. It was a website that was designed to connect people to a temporary place to live. It was called Couch Surfing. I don't even know if it's still around, but so I contacted him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I have an extra room in my house. You can stay as long as you want." And so we had connected for a full year online before I even moved over there. And he would call me just to chat, and like once a month, and then every couple of weeks. And as I got closer to the move, he said, "Well, I'm going to be in Colorado, so do you want to come and meet me?" And so we met in person. And I think the red flags started popping out right away, but I didn't realize what I was seeing. There was a lot of him telling me how I felt instead of asking me how I felt. There was a lot of him making assumptions about things about me without asking me. And at the time, I made a lot of excuses attributing this to cultural differences. Now, remember, this is a person from a different country, grew up in a different culture. Abuse exists in Egypt, but it's to the point where it was in the past in America where it's not talked about. And so I made so many excuses and overlooked so many things that after we got married, he came to me one day and he said, "My father told me to tell you what I have." And I just went, "Oh, so you knew something was wrong." And he had been under the care of a psychiatrist in the past for the same issues. So it definitely wasn't me. It definitely was there before me. And the the words that I heard come out of the psychiatrist's mouth, because I went with him to an appointment shortly thereafter when he admitted to me that something was wrong. The words that came out of the psychiatrist's mouth were borderline personality disorder. And I never heard of that either. So I started reading books, and what I was reading, the way that a lot of these books are written, if you don't recognize your situation and the people that they're talking about, it doesn't make sense to you. So I'm like, no, this doesn't seem like borderline. But years later, after my discard, I came to understand that borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder are classified under cluster B disorders in the DSM-5. And if you tick at least 5 boxes from either of those categories, you're diagnosable. So at the time, with the doctor saying borderline, it does make sense. It's not a far leap to NPD traits and NPD qualities within the same individual.
It seems like there's a spectrum, whereas everyone is so heavily therapized now, or familiar with therapized terminology, especially on social media. So every guy that's a jerk is a narcissist. Every person that's telling you what you don't want to hear is gaslighting you. And these words get severely overused. I got called out by a retired psychologist a couple weeks ago for saying that I thought this van life couple was codependent. Which obviously I wasn't trying to make a professional observation. It was just whatever. Like, it's TikTok. It's TikTok drama. It's stupid. It's silly. And I need to grow up. But how do you feel about the overuse of this word? Do you feel like it lessens the severity of, someone actually being a narcissist? Do you feel like it lessens the severe reality of being abused by someone like that? Because I can tell you, just from my mother, living with my mother, I mean, it's walking on eggshells. When she got home, I had severe anxiety. I was reading your childhood with your stepmother, and so much of that was familiar, where you're like, I didn't know what to say. I needed to say something. I wanted to say the right thing. I wanted to say the right thing, but I didn't know what the right thing was. Because it's never going to be the right thing. They're looking for a reason to tear you apart. You're an emotional punching bag. There's nothing you can do, but you have that anxiety of I have to figure this out quick before the next backhand comes. You know what I mean?
Right. And the overuse of the word narcissist, it really minimizes the damaging reality that the victims live through. Because when you start talking to somebody who's never been through it, real narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, if they've never been through it, and you start to say the word narcissist, they're like, oh, just get over it. It couldn't have been that bad. It was just a bad breakup. And they start to make all these excuses where they're not hearing or seeing the actual damage that was done. I mean, even the appearance of my face has changed. If you see a picture of me from 2012, it has a physical toll, emotional toll, financial toll. Yeah, I mean, this is not my face. This is not normal aging. So it really, when people want to dismiss and say, oh, you don't know that he was a narcissist. I even had a therapist that I went to in Florida, and I was talking to her and I said, well, I have PTSD. And she said, oh, who told you you have PTSD? I said, well, maybe the nightmares that I had for a year solid, maybe the fact that I'm extremely hypervigilant, that if somebody even knocks on their door, I about hit the roof. Like I said, I think I know what I'm going through. And she's like, oh, well, who told you you have PTSD? And I mean, it's just, it's so dismissive.
Disorder symptoms, like what are the traits of someone who has narcissistic personality disorder? Because here's a fun fact. When I was younger, I was diagnosed, and I think it was a misdiagnosis because it really never went beyond that. I wasn't really treated for it other than going to dialectical behavior therapy, which was incredible therapy. I wish I could do it again. I did 2 rounds of it. And it's basically like where you're utilizing the skills in everyday life, and you're in a group session as well as a backup therapist personally. But they diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And now I'm curious. I really believe it was mostly PTSD, but I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. What are the narcissistic traits in the DSM? Do you happen to know them? Do you want me to look them up?
It depends on the kind of narcissism you have. There's something called like overt narcissism, malignant narcissism. There's different types. Now, overt narcissists, these are the ones who are very easy to spot. They are the ones who appear very arrogant when they're in public. They always need to be the center of attention. I didn't have an experience with an overt narcissist. I had experience with a covert, or they also call them vulnerable, and their tactics are more passive aggressive. So in my situation with covert passive aggressive narcissist, you're dealing with an individual who can never take accountability for anything that goes wrong in their life. They are unable to take any form of criticism, even constructive. They have this irrational belief that they're better than other people, but not in the overt way where, it's more, my husband was always saying, oh, so he's jealous of me. She's jealous of me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So it was just this belief that he was better. They still have the same sense of entitlement that overt narcissists do, but it's a little bit more passive, a little bit more discreet. It's not
Very
as
manipulative.
in your face.
They're really good at abusing you right in front of a room full of people, and the people will never even realize what's going on.
So they have some sense of charisma.
What she's talking about with like the covert is like that you can't just like tell someone what they're doing. Like it's hard to like explain what they're doing, but they know that they're doing it to you. You know that they're doing it to you. But like the way they can just like silently tear you apart when there's other people around, and the people around have no idea that it's happening, because it's so, like she said, it's so passive aggressive, it's so manipulative. So like people don't even know that it's like happening while it's happening. Like, do you remember when my mom sent me that package with like all of that, like the photos of my dead friend? Like she went to Hawaii, so she gave me a coaster from her trip while she like basically left me homeless and like refused to help me at all. And then, which I don't even want her help. That's not the point here. But so then she sent me like just all this like weird BS, and I made a video about it on TikTok. I unboxed it. I said, unboxing a package from my mother that I'm no contact with and whatever. And the responses I got were wild. So many people attacking me. You're ungrateful. Like, you're the brat. And I struck a nerve with those other type of moms. The moms that were like that came for me because I was like, hey, everyone, this is what it's like. This is the type of passive aggressive manipulative stuff where it's like, I just sent you a package. I just thought that you would want to see my trip from Hawaii.
There's like 9 symptoms here from the DSM-5 that I just looked up. Do you guys mind if I go through them really quickly, just so others are aware of them?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm just going to read them off real quick. Okay. Grandiose sense of self-importance, exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. Number 2 is preoccupation with fantasies, unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. believes they are special and unique. Now, wait a minute, we're all special and unique, but can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people. Maybe I am a narcissist, y'all. Requires excessive admiration. Vouch me. Has a sense of entitlement. Is interpersonally exploitative. Lacks empathy. Is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of them, and shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. There's
Okay,
definitely
now,
some things that I believe many people can fit some of those check marks in, absolutely, but it doesn't mean that you're diagnosed with it. Definitely, you have to go see a professional for that, but these are things that you should be looking out for if you are concerned that you are being abused by such a person.
yeah, and I just want to add that they don't really separate in that DSM whether it's grandiose, malignant, covert, because it looks different. I have examples of the thinks he's special, but at the core of the vulnerable narcissist or the covert passive aggressive narcissist is a lack of self-esteem within themselves, and they need to take supply from other people, which means they mirror you. They, if you like dogs, they like dogs. If you like football, they like football. They're mirroring you because they think that by turning themselves into you, they're going to be liked by other people. That's how they love bomb you in the beginning. They mirror everything about you.
And they can intimidate someone who has normal emotions and has empathy. They're able to get on stage and act as if they have that, but they really don't. It's all for some end goal or benefit that they can, that they're going to benefit from in the end, that they can gain from.
Well, there's a difference between cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. Like, for example, my husband had cognitive empathy. He understood when bad things happened to other people that it was terrible. For example, one time one of his friends had a car accident and he was like, oh, that's terrible. How's he going to get the money to fix that? So he understood that, but he didn't have the ability to emotionally put himself into seeing somebody standing in front of him crying because of him and understand, oh, I'm causing that pain. I'm the one who's making her cry. So, they have different forms of empathy even that they can display, but they lack the self-esteem within themselves and they need that external validation. And that was one of the big things with the type of narcissist that I dealt with, constantly needing external validation. But I have a great example of the thinks he's special. My husband was Muslim at the time that we got married, and he was non-practicing. He was, he would drink alcohol. He was non-practicing, but still held closely to identifying as a Muslim. And he said to me one day, "I have a special relationship with God," and I said, "I think we all have that." And he said, "No, I have a special relationship with God." And he really believed it. And then there was another time after we had moved to the United States, he told me that he was the only person that had ever immigrated to the United States already speaking English. And I was just like, what? Where are you getting this information? He's like, no, I'm the only one who ever came here already knowing how to speak English. And in his mind, he believed that. And I would bring up newspaper articles and statistics, and I would be like, look. And he would be like, no matter what receipts you bring them, they don't believe you. So that's an example of that disordered thinking. It's not that I'm special. It's they have this delusional thinking, and they create the delusion around them, and the other people prop them up. When you go to, like, my husband had so many friends, and he would act one way in front of them, but behind closed doors act a different way towards me. And he would say, oh, you're the crazy one, because if you ask so-and-so, he'll say that I'm not abusive. And if you ask her, and I'm like, yeah, but they're not seeing it because you're getting your supply from them because they admire you. They think you're a great guy. They think you're a successful businessman. That's what supply is. It's the validation from people who don't know the truth. And once you expose the narcissist, once you see under the mask, you're discarded. He discarded friends. He discarded long-term friends that he had had for a long time because they started to call him out and say, hey,
Yep.
you know what? So it's all about keeping up that mask, that facade in public. And then behind closed doors, they're awful. Absolutely awful.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like, it is music to my ears to hear someone describing and comprehending things that, like, you know, you talk a lot in your book, which everyone can get on Amazon. We'll have it linked in the description. You talk in your book about that isolation. It's isolating. And you didn't know if anyone else had ever even experienced that before. You thought, I'm the only one going through this. Like, this isn't even a real thing. When I try and tell people I'm the crazy one, when I try and tell people about it, oh, what are you talking about? He's a great guy, and no, none of this is happening to you. And you, like I said before, there's just no other way to put it. You feel like you're losing your mind. Like, I'm not going to deny I was mentally unwell living with my mom at that time, but once I got away from her and became my own person, I realized, oh, you had situational anxiety, you had situational depression, because who would be happy being emotionally and mentally tormented by someone that's kind of a nightmare type of person to be around?
You know, women in this, not just all women, but women seem to be the victims of this kind of behavior and abuse more often than not. And I think that we are groomed into it from society. I think that we're set up to be abused in this way. We're set up for failure in this way. The table is all set. And we're given the keys to the room to get to that table and the map to get there and everything, and taught this is how you take the left turn and the right. And we memorize that route our entire lives up until we're, you know, of marriage age or whatever. And I think that we're given this failure setup, and I wonder why that is. I mean, obviously we live in a patriarchal society, but
Well, there is a reason that more men, that more women are victims, because it's actually not true. There are a lot of men who are abused by female narcissists, but the men are not speaking out. The men are not joining the Facebook groups. It's 99% women. The men are suffering in silence. This is my theory, because there are a lot of men who are abused by female narcissists, but they are not seeking the community in the same way that the women are, which is why it looks like it's mostly women who are being abused.
I'm trying to think of how to say this tactfully. Andrew and I trauma bonded because the characteristics of my mother were incredibly similar to the characteristics of his ex-wife. And, you know, they're basically, once she realized she had lost, and she wasn't going to get what she wanted, the kids were the pawn and the torture, the tools of, like, the torture. And basically it was like, if you don't want to be with me, like, you can't see the kids. Like, you didn't leave me, you left the family, which wasn't the case. And he didn't speak out. Like, you know, he was a pastor, so you had to keep a good face. You can't be having marital problems as a pastor. So he would cover up for her. Everything was very under wraps. People didn't know the real her. They didn't know what went on behind the scenes. The fights, the fits, he had to emotionally harbor everything and make everything right. And so when he left the church and decided to leave her, because he remained silent, she was able to really, just like good PR always is, get in front of the narrative, be the first one to say, to get out there. And so she was the victim, and she didn't see this coming, even though they were in marriage counseling for like 3 years. Like, just it's just, the whole thing is a mess. I don't even want to get into it, but it definitely can happen to men. It definitely does. But I think Iman made a really, really interesting point that, like, most men aren't going to, like, bring that up.
Yeah, if you go in the Facebook groups and all the online support groups for victims of narcissistic abuse, it's primarily women. The men aren't like seeking out the community in the same way that the women are and saying, hey, why did this happen? Or what does this mean? Or, the women are kind of like sharing experiences, sharing stories, but the men, I think, are kind of like, even if they're aware that they were with a narcissist, I think they're just kind of dealing with it in their own way, or maybe they're bonding with other men who've been through the same thing, but we really don't see them that much. Now, there's a couple of really good people on TikTok who speak out about narcissist recovery, but they're not victims of abuse. They're like educators. There's the one guy, Danish or Danish, I don't know how to say his name. He's really good, but I don't think he's a victim. I think he's just a narcissist abuse educator, or recovery coach or something like that. But there are men out there, but they're not seeking out the community openly. They're not shouting from the rooftops like the women are. Like they're one of the
I think
reasons
it's
they
the
came
same.
up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one of the reasons I came up with the screen name Discarded Wife was because there was a group called Runaway Husbands. And I said, well, it's full of women complaining about why their husband left them, how their husband left them. And I'm like, well, that's putting the focus on them. Let's put the focus on what's left behind, the ones who were thrown away like old pairs of shoes, the discarded wives. So that's kind of how I came up with that whole thing. So and Kyla, I just want to say I don't think it's fair to say that you and Andrew trauma bonded. I think you bonded over a trauma. You bonded over like a joint trauma, because trauma bonding is more when you stay with your abuser because that's all you know. You're bonded by the trauma. So I think
Oh,
you and Andrew bonded over
yeah.
your collective
Yeah,
traumas, or
yeah,
your
definitely. Definitely. That's
Society is absolutely setting us both up for failure, male, female, narcissist, and non-narcissist. I think it also sets up the narcissist to have the personality disorder in the first place. I think if people hadn't gone through the trauma and the pain of suppressing emotions for so many years, like we've done for so long, that this wouldn't be the case if we were able to express ourselves and learn how to do that in a healthy way.
So is a narcissist created or born? Is it nature versus nurture? And is there a solution for, like, can you fix someone or make them stop being one?
No. It's not necessarily born, because there's nothing genetic that causes this. At least there's nothing in your personality that's genetically. So it's not like schizophrenia where they can go in and they can find genes, or they can find some organic cause and they can treat that with a medication. Your personality is not part of your physical body. Your personality is part of your soul or your ethereal self, and therefore it cannot be fixed by a pill. Now, a lot of medication is prescribed, primarily antidepressants, to look at to treat like the coexisting conditions. However, you cannot fix a personality disorder with a pill. If a person chooses to admit to themselves, I have this disorder, it's causing problems in my life, I need to get help, they need to stick with long-term cognitive behavioral therapy for years. And the very disorder prevents them from saying to themselves, I have a problem and I need help.
Absolutely.
They say, I'm okay now that the person I discarded is gone, everything's fine. So it just keeps the cycle
You cannot
perpetuating.
keep them in therapy. Like, you cannot, like, it, once again, like, me and Andrew had similar experiences where we were both in therapy with the other person of conflict. I don't know how to say this appropriately, but basically, like, we were both in therapy with these other people that we're having issues with, and it's like never them. They never say sorry. How can therapy work if you're not going into it with, like, oh, maybe I should be more introspective? Like, they don't have that ability to be introspective and take any accountability. So, like, you can't move forward. It's like pointless to do therapy with them, is how I felt.
Well, I have a different perspective here. And I mean, I'm just using AI here to like quick get some answers. But it turns out that it can be genetically hereditary. There's a huge, strong evidence that narcissism has a hereditary component. There's some studies that have shown that traits can be moderately to highly heritable. The temperament of a child, naturally more sensitive, bold, reactive, self-focused, might set the stage for later narcissistic patterns if shaped in certain ways by the environment. And there's also something about brain structure here, where some studies are suggesting people with NPD may have differences in brain areas related to empathy, emotion regulation, or like the insular or prefrontal cortex. So say you had, more pressure on the brain because you were situated in your mother's womb or something differently, that might affect how your brain developed. Now, there's another end of this, which is nurture, formed by experience. The parenting style, overvaluation, which is treating the child as superior or flawless, or inconsistent validation, swinging between praise and criticism, can fuel these traits. Neglect, abuse. It can also develop narcissistic traits, and a protective shell for children who felt abandoned, ignored, and emotionally unsafe. Especially if they learn to perform for approval or attention, which we all know that that's something most of us went through. Culture and environment can play a role as well, which is your society around you that rewards competition, status, image, and self-promotion, like social media culture. It's funny because when you were saying that about your husband, I was thinking, wow, he would have been a great influencer. Really, seriously, these things can amplify those tendencies. So it's interesting. Like there is a genetic argument behind it, but even if they have the genetic heredity for it, it all depends on how the rest of their life plays out too. So it's a little bit of both.
Right. Well, when I said it's not genetic, I didn't mean like passed from parent to child. I meant that it's not something that it's not like a disease that affects your body that suddenly comes out of nowhere, like other kinds of illnesses that are organic. They have an organic nature, and be passed down from generation to generation. Because as a matter of fact, my husband has said that he knew other family members that were like that. Now, in his case, keep in mind, I don't know how much you guys know about Egypt, probably not that much, but the culture in Egypt with the firstborn male child, the parenting style, especially related to the mother, very overbearing, very, coddling kind of. So, it's not uncommon for mothers to choose their husband's wife or their husband's career, and that's what happened in my husband's case. His mother told him he should be an engineer, so he became an engineer. He was very close, the mother and the firstborn son. So and then she passed away when he was 18 or 19.
Oh, wow.
So that to me is what triggered his, because here's this person that he was so dependent on for every aspect of his life, and then all of a sudden she was gone. She got sick and died very suddenly. So that's where his comes from. It's not from abuse. Like a lot of people say that only abuse forms narcissism, and this is not true. It like Bunny said, it can be an overbearing parent, it can be a culture that puts unrealistic expectations, like Middle Eastern culture. They have a lot of pressure on them. So I think it's mostly environmental, but yes, he did mention that there were other family members that he knew of who were similar to him.
That totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
like I see it in American men, we call it like, oh, you're a mama's boy. And like I have totally been around those types of men where it's like, oh, we are not going to be compatible. Like your mom wipes your butt for you and does everything for you, and like this is not how you do not like me. You think you like me, you do not like me, and you're not going to like me.
I met someone in Slab City that knew he was diagnosed with NPD. And very rough past. The kid in kindergarten, like removed from school for plotting a teacher's public burn. It's not funny, but okay, so this kid knew he had issues. When I met him, I believe he was in his 30s, and he had termed a name for himself. Everybody gets a traveling name in slabs, and usually the name is given to you. But Bunny is one that was given to me. Everyone else, like it was more like what you did with your life and how. And he chose his own, and I just guess what he decided to call himself.
I don't even want to know. I'm terrified.
Superman.
Oh, that's actually that's horrific in a cringy way.
Yeah.
Well, good for him.
Not a Superman. But like these are like obvious things that you might want to look out for. Like I feel like these traits, like we call everybody, this is part of the problem that what we wanted to talk about in the podcast as well, that like that, and we've touched on this, narcissism and using that word to describe someone or someone's behavior is overused in pop culture and social media right now. And a lot of
I just did it. I just said me and Andrew trauma bonded, and discarded was
right?
like, that's not what you meant to say.
That's why we're talking about stuff so that we can, I'm learning while we're doing this, and it's totally okay. But like, it's great to have these discussions so that we're not an echo chamber, so that we can see that like, okay, we're using this word a little bit too much and we really have no idea what narcissism is. But like seeing the traits and seeing the behaviors once in a while is one thing. And seeing the traits consistently in a pattern is a total other thing. So what Iman was dealing with was narcissistic.
A consistent pattern, following a cycle. And the way that I wrote my book, because I tried to read a lot of books about NPD that were written from a clinical perspective, and I didn't recognize a lot of the situations because, like I said, narcissism is on a spectrum, and these books weren't very helpful to me. So in writing my book, I decided to make it a memoir, but I followed, if you notice, it's in 5 different parts: the love bombing, the idealization, devaluation, discard, hoover, and then the aftermath. Because narcissists follow a consistent pattern of love bomb, idealize, devalue, idealize, devalue, idealize, devalue. They'll go back and forth between those two for years, and then the discard, and then the hoover. You get sucked back in and it starts all over again. So I divided up my story, and it's not all sad. I mean, there's a lot of fun things in there about my time living in Egypt and my travels, but I divided up the story into those parts: the love bombing, the roller coaster of idealization and abuse, the discard, and the aftermath, the PTSD.
One thing I want to talk about in the book that I thought was really interesting, you are a bit of a clairvoyant, and there's a lot, if you guys get this, which it's linked in the description, it's on Amazon, there is talk of these dreams that Iman had, even when she was younger, and they kind of, she would have a dream about seeing her boyfriend, her friend's boyfriend, like on the porch with a different girl, and then she went and told her friend, and she's like, oh, don't bring him up, like he left me for so and so. And then you had a dream that had a lot of symbolism about converting to Islam, about going to Egypt. That's how this whole thing of Egypt came about. So I'm honestly interested in hearing, and everybody else hearing, a little bit more of what was it like when you first, like when you guys were in Egypt together. Was there ever a honeymoon phase? Was there ever, like, because you said there was red flags right away, but like, was there ever anything you would consider a honeymoon phase where you're like, this was a great time in our life, like I remember having a great time with them? And was it actually genuine, or do you think they were just love bombing you?
2009. The year 2009, after he came out to me and told me that he had been with the psychiatrist before, we started going back to the psychiatrist regularly. Things kind of leveled off and remained pretty even keeled. There were, minor episodes, but 2009 in my mind was a wonderful time between us. I think it was genuine. He was sticking with the medications at the time, which basically were just anti-depressants, but I think it was helping a little bit. It's not eliminating. There were still episodes where he would be like suspicious or paranoid over something, or he was constantly going through my chat history, my phone, like that just general stuff. And there was little things, but I remember 2009 as being really wonderful. We communicated a lot during that time, which was something unique, and because you can't communicate with a narcissist, you go around in circles. So it had a different feel. And then when 2010 came, I made the decision that that we should leave Egypt, because I knew that the revolution was coming, and that's in my book also. But I decided that we should move, and it would be a good chance for him to start over. He was having he was not really happy at work, and I said, well, let's go. What's stopping you? Let's go. You can start over in the United States. You can get a job and start over. And so he was like, yeah, okay. And so I came back before him, and we had actually already hired a lawyer. We had hired a lawyer in Florida, and we were making installment payments. And I don't know if you know anything about getting the spousal visas, but it takes years. So we kind of thought we would be apart for a few years. But the revolution happened, and then we decided to let him come in on the visa. He already had a visa to visit the U.S. He had a business visa. We decided to let him come in on that, and then make an adjustment of status. So we were only apart for about 6 months. But during the time that I was gone, he was, when he's alone and his mind wanders and he rewrites the narrative and his delusions start kicking in, he would say, oh, you're cheating on me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm over here working 2 jobs. And when he was alone, then he would get into what I called the 50 Shades of Crazy, and then I kind of ended things. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this. That was like the end of 2010. Well, when the revolution happened, lo and behold, he had an epiphany. Oh, I'm so sorry. I learned a valuable lesson. I almost lost you. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to ever do this again. And I said, look, don't come to the United States unless you're coming to be with me. Don't come for any other reason. He said, no, but of course. And years later, after I was discarded in 2016, I found out that he had told one of his friends that he came here because he was worried about his job in Egypt after the revolution. He didn't say, I came here because I love my wife and I want to be with her. So that's how the narcissist uses you. They see value in you only for what you can provide for them. He needed something from me. Before he decided he needed me, he was ready to dump me. And then as soon as he got his U.S. citizenship, our whole marriage was a mistake. And I'm like, yeah, after 8 years?
Yeah.
That's something you realize in the first month, maybe, but not after 8 years. So once I no longer had anything to offer him, once I no longer had anything he needed, I no longer had value. And this is the thing you have to realize if you're dealing with a person who does actually have something from the cluster B disorders, is they're using you, but they don't come right out and say, I'm using you, but they see, it's like that manipulation you were talking about earlier. There's something they need from you. So they're going to keep you in the fold until they get that. And then they'll dump you like an old pair of shoes into a Goodwill donation box.
Absolutely.
Like you never existed.
And they will build you up and then tear you down because so for my mom, she was a single mom, partially by choice. And it was like, I had to be this perfect trophy daughter so that it was really about her, though. It wasn't about what's best for me and, I want you to do ballet and go to photography, whatever. And, you're in you're doing college courses in high school and this is for your betterment. That's not what it was. It was for her to be like, I'm a good parent. I had to be X, Y, and Z to validate her as a parent. And even when I did that, it still wasn't right. It wasn't about oh, good job, I'm so proud of you. No. This was for her to go and tell people about. But behind closed doors, it didn't matter if I got an F or an A+, it was still the same treatment. Let's be clear here. And once I was like, screw you, I'm moving out, I don't want anything to do with you, well then, you were crazy and terrible and you were difficult to raise. And I'm like, all right, pal. Well, it was nice knowing you. Thank you for that.
A narcissist doesn't have the capacity to love unconditionally. They can only love conditionally. So whether you're with a narcissistic partner or a narcissistic parent, there's always a condition of your love. If you do something for me, I will love you. If you do what I tell you to do, I will love you. If you have something I need from you, I will love you. So there's always conditions. They don't have the capacity to love unconditionally. And if
And
you're
if you
ever
don't act perfect, you're going to go right into foster care. We don't want you anymore.
right. It's conditional. It's conditional idealization. It's not even love. I'm going to idealize you and make you think I love you as long as you're doing everything that I tell you to do, the exact way that I tell you to do. And this goes for spousal relationships and parent-child narcissistic relationships too. It's conditional idealization.
It's so real. It's so real. And I think that's the hardest part. If you're like dealing with this abuse right now, the hardest part is to accept that that person doesn't really love you, and it doesn't matter what you do, they never will. So like, please, like, take this
Spend
portion.
your life trying to appease them, and
It's
it will, and that's what they want, and it will break you down to your absolute nothing. You will be dust. You will be in the corner with the dust bunnies, just like trying to pick yourself up, and you can do it again. You absolutely can take yourself back together again, but it's not an easy road. So
You got to get out of there. Listen to me
as soon as possible.
Listen to me. You got to get out of there.
Listen to me. Yeah. I would have never left if I hadn't been discarded, because I was so conditioned to try and make it work, try and fix the problem, try and find the problem and fix it. I would have never left, and it would have probably unalived me. I probably would have had so much cortisol, so much adrenaline flowing through my body that I probably would have had a heart attack.
It almost did for me too. I think that the way that my parents behave, hi mom, hi dad. Dad is an absolute narcissist. Mom may be a little bit more empathetic than that, but they enable each other in it. And I think that set me up to seek a man very similar like that. And I ended up, very close to death because of it. So, and I also think my son's father was definitely narcissist, but I think at that time it was called antisocial. Antisocial was the name of the DSM diagnosis, and I think that fits into the same thing now. See, you and I, Iman, we grew up in a time where we're on the cusp. Like, we grew through this transition period where when we were kids, everything was just barely starting to be talked about freely. Therapy for it, understanding what the children were going through, and having that recognition that like they were dealing with all these emotions they shouldn't have to deal with yet, and that the parents were shaming the children if this was the case, and like all these other things, and that the parent was responsible, and even the parents sometimes didn't know what was going on, and they were getting shamed, and like, so there's all this stuff that was pushed under the rug and ignored. And even my mom, there was stuff from her childhood that, as a boomer, everything was, you don't talk about that. We don't talk about it. It just goes out of sight, out of mind. She ended up suppressing things until she was in her 60s, 70s. And then here we are coming over that and jumping over that fence and trying to cross that border of pushing everything under the rug and ignoring it, and then blaming the wrong person. And then actually like, okay, where do we need to really look at? Like, is it a blame game? No, it's this consistent pattern that's been in society that is absolutely detrimental to all of us. Where was I going with that? Who knows? But it's definitely something that over these generations we've had to grow up through a different transition. And I'm just so grateful that right now we have a platform and a place and others that we can discuss it with freely, so that we are able to be a voice for those who aren't able to do this. So if you're listening and this resonates with you, we hear you. We're here to be a voice for you. And please reach out to someone you can help. And if you don't know who that is, maybe we can provide some links in the caption to do so.
And I think it's also important to note that when somebody comes to you and tells you a story, even if you find it unbelievable, do not invalidate them by saying you don't think it's true, because this was the most frustrating thing for me when I went through it with my mother, and when I went through it with my birth mother too. I have no contact with her, also all of them, and with my husband, is when you're trying to explain to people and they're just kind of like, that doesn't sound normal, or that doesn't sound right. I think, you don't devalue people's experiences that they're telling you about, because it was so hard for them to open up. It took me years. The first time I opened up was in 2000, I think it was 2014. I went to England and I was visiting an old friend who I knew from Egypt. And I'm sitting there at her dining room table with her and her husband. And all of a sudden I just blurted all this out. And they were looking at me like, what? And they were like, well, why don't you just talk to him? And I'm like, well, therein lies the problem, but everything that I said, they just didn't get it. So they didn't know how to, they didn't know what to say. And not everybody needs their problem solved. Sometimes they just need to get it out and be heard. And that's really hard to do if you're in a situation where you're not sure if you're being abused, or you're hiding it, or you're still in denial. It's hard to take that first step and tell someone. So, like when I went no contact with my parents throughout the 1980s, I can't tell you how many people said, oh, you need to make up with your family because your family's all you have. Like as if I was the one who had done something wrong and it was just a little argument and we were going to kiss and make up. They just don't get it. Don't devalue other people's experiences by holding their situation up to a mirror of your own life. This is the worst mistake you can make with an abuse victim, an abuse survivor.
Absolutely.
Iman, now you're on the other side of this. Like, what helped you get over this? There's got to be some kind of healing thing that you went through. Did you get therapy? Are you working towards another relationship ever, or is this kind of like shut you down from that? What does healing look like for you? Like, what side of this are you on, and what do you have to look forward to?
No, I do not get therapy and will not after the experience I had in Florida with who told you you have PTSD. My healing looks like TikTok. It looks like occasionally some of the Facebook groups that I'm a member of, which are basically memes being posted, like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So very profound memes that are very educational, but really TikTok, which was why I was so devastated about the fact that TikTok could potentially be eliminated. I'm still in the self-isolating phase. I have no friends. I have no family. Kyla's the first person I gave my phone number to in 10 years. You're the first, like, I don't, I interact on social media with other people that I feel connected to. And I can only connect to other people if they have, because I can tell when people have had a similar experience. I can't relate to just anybody in the public anymore, so I don't.
I think it is a safe move to kind of keep to yourself for a little while. I totally get that. I also think reaching out and having that community, even though it's virtual or it's still real, it might be through the digital landscape.
It's very real. It's very real, and it also feels safer for us. It feels safer for victims of abuse to have online friendships and relationships, because you can't really hurt me. Like if I don't like this, I can just like get offline and it's over. Like it's when someone like that is so insidious and they take over every aspect of your life, you don't have any individuality anymore. So like it's terrifying to let real humans into your life and like really see you and have access to you in real life. That's the scary part. But I think what's been most helpful for me is just like talking about it and listening to other people, because the experience is so invalidating, just so absolutely invalidating to go through it, that part of the recovery of it is like admitting what really happened and like admitting that it was real. So much of what I experienced growing up, my mom has completely erased. It's not true. That didn't happen. That didn't. And a lot of you listening, someone that after like a horrific argument months later, that didn't happen. I didn't say that. And it's like,
I I thought we were over this.
What reality are you living in, people?
Getting
Even the
over
next
it.
day,
Oh.
they even forget about it the next day. I went through that a lot. That's where you end up in the circular arguments, bringing your receipts, your texts, your emails. You said this on this day at this time. Oh no, I didn't. No, I didn't. It's
It
like
doesn't
ridiculous.
matter. No, it doesn't matter. You can't. There's no logic. There's no logic. There's no resolution.
Exactly.
And it has taught me as an adult now, like, in real life, I don't need to be around somebody like that. There's just a lot of people where I'm like, something doesn't feel right about you. And everyone's like, why? They're awesome. And I'm like, no, I don't like them. And I think I know why. And I just stay away from them. And that's fine if everyone else thinks they're awesome. Or I still, whether it's like in the performance industry, you get a lot of that. So you'll have people, and there are other women doing it to women, like women on women type of abuse, where it's like, we're best friends and they like what you have, but then they're like building you up, then tearing you down, and like building you up and tearing you down. And it's like this succubus type work relationship. Like, it's really like, like, it's hard to explain, like, unless people have gone through it. Like, I know people are listening right now and they're like, yes, like, I had a friend like that. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it will creep up on you. You don't know it's happening until you're like, why do I hate myself? And I've isolated, and this person like rules my life now. So I don't know where to go from here, but just admitting it to yourself. If you constantly feel like you're in the wrong in a friendship or relationship, or even with your family, if you feel like you're constantly having to defend yourself, if you feel like anything that is wrong in their life somehow directly correlates to you being the culprit in that, maybe start to pay attention. There might be a pattern.
Yeah, the patterns are a huge thing. One of the biggest mistakes that I made is that each time there would be this, like, I called them in my book like fires that I had to put out. Each time I would put out the fire, I'd think, okay, that's done, that's out. And then the next thing would happen, and I wouldn't make the connection in my mind that it's related to what happened before, that it's a pattern. I would think, oh, this is a separate incident. And I kept jumping from one incident to another. And then it was only after I discovered what NPD abuse was when I started to see the patterns, and I was like, oh my God, it all makes sense now. It all makes sense to me now. Like, I couldn't see this before. Why wasn't I taught this in my general Psych 101 class that I had to take as part of my core college classes? That would have been useful to have learned instead of having to take algebra and trigonometry. How about teaching us these things, that are going to protect our mental health, because we're just creating generational trauma by keeping this cycle going round and round.
Absolutely. Do you think that people with this disorder, I know there's a spectrum, but do you think that a lot of people in high power, successful positions, whether it's political, financial, economic, do you think that type of personality disorder gives them a leg up to be in those positions of power and success?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Because you can't really get to the top and be humble. Well, let's just say very few people have gotten to the top and been humble. You get to the top by knocking down other people and climbing over other people. So I would say all of the above: religious institutions, political, corporate, all of the above, type A personalities, for sure, but probably a little bit on the spectrum as far as the narcissistic traits. I mean, we all have narcissistic traits at some point. And, but the thing about having it as a disorder is when it's being displayed as a repeated pattern. If you are the person in your relationship who's saying, am I the narcissist? Am I the one with the problem? Then 99% you're not, because if you're introspecting, if you're reflecting, if you're trying to take accountability, you're not the narcissist. So, I think it's dangerous in politics. It's dangerous in religion, particularly. But yeah, there's a ton of
Well, it's the perfect collection of characteristics where you have no self-doubt, you have full throttle confidence, you're great at manipulating people, you have no problem using people. And so
everyone's enabling you to continue that behavior.
So it's like the
Right.
perfect recipe. It's so messed
Right.
up. It's the perfect recipe. So yeah, me and Andrew always joke around that we'd be more successful if we were people. We just like we can't screw over people. I'm like, oh, I'd make so much money if I just didn't care and could do like all of these like just like horrible things that go against my own like ethical code. But hey, I'd rather be in my position, and well, I guess I would be able to sleep at night. That's the thing. If I didn't have the moral code, if I wasn't empathetic, then I would be able to sleep at night after doing all those horrible things. But I can't. Damn it.
You're too humble and you have too much empathy. Yeah.
That just doesn't make a successful corporate mogul. Sorry, guys.
Right.
So let's bring it back to your book. I have some questions here. What did you like? Who did you write it for? We know what inspired it, but like, what do you hope your readers take away from it?
Well, because of the way that I wrote it as a memoir, I was trying to find a way to incorporate what I went through in my childhood, because it was connected, and the dreams that Kyla mentioned, because those are connected. So it's kind of a fun read if you're a memoir reader. Anyway, it might be enjoyable. But as far as who I target it towards, anybody who might recognize something of their own relationship in that, because I have had people read it and say to me, thank you for writing this, like it's making me look at my relationship better, closer, and realize that everything's not as perfect as I thought it was. So I wrote it. I don't want to say I was targeting a specific demographic or anything like that, but hopefully anybody who does read it will either learn something. If they're not involved in those type of situations, they'll say, wow, I had no idea that these kind of things were happening in the world. And or if they are in a situation similar, hopefully that they can see that. Because if I would have read a book like my own book, I think I would have woken up a lot sooner. I might have been able to wake up a lot sooner, but because I didn't know the name to search for, I had never searched for anything about personality disorders. I had never searched for any information. It would have helped me tremendously. So that's who I wrote it for.
And also, I want to backtrack just a little bit. You said that there was no physical abuse with your ex-husband, and that's what kind of makes it a little bit different, is that we're constantly told that if he's abusive, you have a problem, we've got to get out of that relationship. But what's not really talked about is the emotional abuse and how just as damaging that can be.
And a lot of the times there's no legal action you can take. Like unless you have a black eye, it's like, what are you talking about? Like you guys just had an argument. That's how it's looked at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the fact that I would have full-blown panic attacks and actually shake uncontrollably, that's a physical manifestation of the abuse. But you're right. If you're not showing up with some kind of physical bruise on your body or broken bone, it's like, oh, just get over it. Just get over it. Just leave him and get over it. So this is a huge problem. Now, I think it's in the UK. They're making verbal and emotional abuse similar to physical within their legal and court system. That's something that I truly believe needs to happen here. I also have heard a lot of people toss around it would be a great idea to have a registry, just for women who meet guys online to search for. The how ethical this is, I don't know, but I surely would love to try to warn people about getting involved with a particular individual. But something like that we could see in the future.
I like the concept, but I fear that it could be
it would be
misused to hurt people that aren't actually
Right.
It
would be abused.
It's just tough because it's also people's your medical history is like technically like with HIPAA laws, at least here, it's supposed to be private. So like it's like, okay, I want to know if this person has that, but it's like their own personal like medical history, if they're even diagnosed, because I feel like it goes undiagnosed, or like you said, no one that, not no one, but one of the characteristics is like they're not going to admit it or go get help. So like a lot of the people that have it likely aren't officially diagnosed. They're just kind of floating around.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, that's another reason I wrote the book, is for potential future victims of that individual. So there you go, because they always keep you away from the exes in their life. There was exes in my husband's life, and I was not allowed to talk to them. Why? Because they would have told me.
That I was reading that in the book. Mm-hmm. You sat there. You guys have to read this, by the way. Like it's actually a really good read. It flows really naturally, and if you've gone through any type of narcissistic abuse, like it was just such a refreshing read. Like yes, it's heavy. Like yes, there's like obviously upsetting stuff in there, but it felt so validating as I was reading it. I was like, yep, I know that. I was like, did I write this? So there was a part in the book where you talk about 2 exes he had, and he said the weirdest, like it was the most like just dismissive, like you were reading the emails with him from him and the ex or whatever, and you're like, well, whatever happened? And one of them, he's like, well, she just went and did laundry, and it just didn't work out. It's like, what?
Yeah, it was the paranoia. Yeah, there was 3 exes. One was also an American, probably a little bit older than him. I was only 5 years older than him. And then there was the in Brazil, my favorite one.
Yep.
And then there was the one that he met online. And I was asking him, like, well, what happened? Why did you break up? And he would say, well, she was crazy. And I went like, oh, wait a minute. Women don't just go crazy for no reason. And he said, no, she just used to go crazy and throw me out of her apartment. And I'm like, if I could have reached out and talked to her, I'm sure I would have heard a different story. And then there was the one, he said, well, she got arrested. Her dog bit somebody, or it was like a little minor misdemeanor thing. And I was like, oh, I'm hearing excuses. And then the next one, she went to do her laundry. So I'm sure she was busy with her daily life, and he was suspicious. Oh, you're cheating on me because you're not talking to me 24/7. And so his side of the story, I knew even back then when I was hearing it, I knew it was a spin. I knew that if I could have gotten through
to or there was never any accountability.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could have talked to any of these women, I'm sure I would have heard an entirely different story. Yeah.
I think that's also a really good point, even for just people in the dating world or relationship wise. I think it's healthy to talk about your past breakups and your exes, and especially like in the early phases, like that's a great sign if they have nothing to say on their part that they did anything wrong. Because when me and Andrew talk about our exes, obviously I was apprehensive when we first decided, let's do this for real. And I was like, okay, like how much of what he's saying is true? There's always his side, her side, and then the truth. And then I actually had communication with his ex and met her and read the emails. And I was like, got it. So everything Andrew said was actually accurate. And, he's an awesome guy. But within that, even when we were talking to each other about our exes, it's like, well, I could have done this better. We weren't a good fit. We got married young. Like, it wasn't like them. Like, we were never like, it was all them. Like, we were, but like, I was awful to my ex. I was a nightmare. You wouldn't even recognize. I was a horrible person. You know what I mean? I was open with that about Andrew, and I was like, they weren't giving me what I needed. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like they cared about me, blah, blah, blah. And so I just lashed out, and I was like completely untethered, and I was just like a horrific human being, quite frankly. And so if you're talking with someone that you're considering having a serious relationship with, if the way they talk about their ex is like it was just them, obviously, I think Bunny gets a pass because her ex literally tried to kill her. But anybody else, I
Well,
think,
I'm not looking for any more relationships. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm
But-
not either.
I
I'm
can
not
see
either.
You're
red
done with
flags
it.
now so quick that
Done.
I'm just like, oh no, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
But even if they keep you away from their exes, like if you say, especially if they have children together, they're still in contact. I'd love to have a cup of coffee with your ex. If they say no, there's a reason they're keeping you away from each other.
Mhm.
I'm not
Yep.
saying it's a good idea to have a chat with everybody's ex. It depends on how long they were together, what the nature of their relationship was. But if they're intentionally keeping you away, like the one part in my book where the phone rang and he said, "Oh, shh, don't say anything. This is my ex on the phone."
No, time to
That
go.
should have been a red flag. Yeah, that should have been a red flag. Yeah.
But it's don't shame yourself if you don't see the red flags, because we're not taught what the red flags are. And it takes some kind of wisdom and experience and life lesson to teach you what those red flags are. So if something doesn't feel right, just listen to your guts first of all. But if you don't know and then you later learn, oh, I could have like prevented all that from happening if I had just known the red flags, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. So give yourself some grace. I do want to say, like, thank you so much for coming on and being so bold and sharing your story, because we need that so much more from women, and to also have empathy for the other side, the person who's struggling with NPD, males as well, and seeing that this isn't just a poor me victim thing. There's a huge problem here with society and the way it's looked at and the way that it's genetically processed and nurtured and gone through experiences, and how we're feeding that in some cases. Thank you so much for being so open to like just the whole wraparound of this topic. But I also want to emphasize to people out there that Iman has done van life, and I believe that she's able to face some of these harder things because she had that skill set under her belt. And a lot of single women who are dealing with domestic violence or narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse, even from your parents, from your friends, from coworkers, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. You have the option to quit the job, to leave the husband, to break up with the boyfriend, to get out of the house. You don't have to pay rent. There are options. It doesn't have to be scary. It really is a mindset. And I want to remind people of that van life is a skill set. You can learn it.
It's self-reliance skills.
Yes, and they will take you to places throughout your life. Even if you're just doing van life for a little while to escape something until you get yourself on your feet.
absolutely.
It can be a very viable avenue of escaping something bad.
Absolutely. Never stay in that situation just because. That's what I did. I didn't know about like living in a vehicle. Like my situation, like I was just told like, you're nothing, you can't do anything. What are you going to do? Go live on the street, go be homeless. And like, I absolutely was strong enough and could have at that age, and it would have been healthier than staying in that environment. And if the only reason you're staying is out of financial fears and, what am I going to do? Live in my car? Yes, you can go live in your car.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We've all done it. Me and Bunny still doing it. Like you absolutely can. And that can be a great avenue to get into a different living situation. But like, I just want that to be an option for people as a way to escape an abusive situation.
Especially an abusive situation. I want you guys to know that my son's father went to prison for second-degree attempted murder. It did not get life. That's a whole nother episode, really. But he is up for parole. He will eventually get out, and that means that I have to keep moving. Thank God I'm comfortable doing that, and that I know when he gets out, he won't have the resources to come find me, and then I don't have a trail. He never knows nobody ever knows where I'm going to be left. It's up here, and you can't get in there, babe. So, I feel so much safer knowing that I always have an exit plan. I've hitchhiked. I've lived in multiple different kinds of vehicles. I've been on foot. I've been in a tent. I've lived in a sedan, and I have this beautiful big van now. And I might change it up in a couple months. I don't know. But, I always have that exit plan, even if everything goes to shit and I can get in a backpack and take my dog and walk down the road. I know that I have a safety plan that no one else can trump. And beyond that, I know that I can take care of myself because of the life I've lived alternatively in van life. So I want that to be something that women know, that it doesn't have to be scary. It's gonna be in the beginning, but it's you got me, you got Kyla. There's a whole slew of van lifers that are ready to answer your questions and help you out along the way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a huge supportive community of people that will
really
help you. Like if you want to know what's the best composting toilet, or how do you fill your water, how, there's so much. I think the van life community is, there's different levels of it. You've got the $200,000 sprinter builds outs, and they're interested in traveling and doing all that. They're not really focused on the practical day-to-day logistical things, but there are so many resources that you can learn how to do what you need to do in your car or in your van.
Yep.
And it's not as scary as everybody thinks it is. To me, I almost wish I could go back to it right now, but like I said, I have this situation with my son. I'm trying to hold on for him to keep stability in his life, and even though everything's going to catch up with us eventually, this situation is not sustainable the way it is. We're making it work for now. So for me, I don't see van life as a sentence. I see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
I was not unhappy when I did it at all.
No, definitely not. And it sounds like, it was a joyous occasion. It was not all fear and doom. And I think a lot of people either see it as black or white. Like if you don't have the expensive Sprinter van, it's going to be fear and doom and gloom. And it doesn't have to be that way. I started out in a hatchback with a futon mattress in the back, and it was awesome. My son did it for a year and traveled in an even smaller car that was a hatchback. He did it with a dog. And we did it together, and it was amazing, an amazing experience. Maybe he'll do it again in a bigger vehicle. But like, even if you just start out in a tiny little, Mini Cooper, it's fine. You can move up from there. This is temporary, and you can make the best of it. You really can. I want to share, I want you to share how people can connect with you, Iman. Like, where do you have a website, the name of the book again, and then your social media presence? So if you want to list that, go ahead.
So the book is available on Amazon, and I'm happy to announce that the audiobook is now available. That's also linked through Amazon, or it's sold separately on Audible if you have a subscription with Audible, or you can purchase it through Audible. But if you buy the ebook, you can get the audiobook, I think, for like a cheaper price. I think it's like $1.99. You can do that as an add-on. So that's what I would recommend, getting the ebook, Save the Trees, because it is a big book. It's 450 pages. So I would recommend the ebook and the audiobook to go along with it. And I do have a website. I do have a link tree at the back of the book, which has a website on it, which is basically, it's very static. I'm not posting anything to it regularly. I do have my TikTok, Discarded Wife on TikTok.
What is the website?
I think it's I Will Ruin Your Life, just the first letter, IWRYL. It's like a Wix website. But my link tree should be posted here in the description. I think
this is backwards.
Kyla's gonna put that.
This is backwards, but I have it. It's in the back of the book.
Yeah, I'm gonna be updating that. So I'm not very active on social media at the moment, but my YouTube would be Discarded Wife, which I hopefully will become very active on that soon. I think it's been because of the fact that I know people like to see positive things on YouTube, and I haven't really felt that way, but I've decided recently that I'm just going to show myself how I am. I'm not going to try to be somebody that I'm not. I'm not going to try to be something that I'm not. I'm going to show the bad side as well as the good side. And I'm not afraid to do that. And I think that's one of the things that have prevented me from starting my YouTube channel, because I've had it for 4 years. nothing's there.
People don't want polished anymore. I think
No, we
that
want authenticity.
yeah, people want authentic, and people want, that was
Yeah.
like one of the good things about TikTok when it first got started, is it wasn't like Instagram where you have to be a bikini model at a 5-star resort. Like, you on TikTok, you could just be like, hey, I can't afford rent anymore, and now I live in a Honda Pilot. Like, that's what I did, and everyone was like, oh, cool, yeah, I'm about to be homeless
Right.
too. And so, like, people want to see other real life stories. It's relatable, and it's so valuable. And thank you so much for coming on. It honestly, this book has been a really refreshing read. I was worried it was going to be heavy, and it does talk about heavy stuff for sure, but reading it felt just like, somebody gets me. So if you're looking for a read like that, highly recommend. As soon as I started reading it, I was like, okay, heck yeah, like, this is for me. So I was sure that no one else in the world was going through what I was going through. I tried to tell people what was happening. And then there was another part where there was a part where it was like you and your stepmom, and it was like I needed to say the right thing, but I didn't know what the right thing was. Like, that really struck with me, because that's how you feel in that type of situation. You're just trying to, you're basically trying to like mitigate someone else's emotions all the time. And that really struck with me as a child. And the fact that you experienced that when you were a child, I was just like, ugh, it's the worst. It's the worst to be a little kid and you're like, I have to pacify this adult, and quick. It's the worst feeling.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because, it's a situation sometimes where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like,
Yep.
you choose something to say, and then that's still wrong.
No.
So, I think as I was creating the audiobook for this, I had to go back and listen to everything. And this is one of the last paragraphs. It says, no matter what story Weil tells about the demise of our marriage, I remember one important thing. The first and biggest lie the narcissist tells is to himself. No matter what words come out of his mouth or what he believes happened, the truth of the matter is that I was discarded when he decided I no longer had any value to add to his life, when he had broken me so severely that I could no longer function but as a shadow of my former self, when I stopped being a good source of supply for him. So all these years later, even though I wrote this book 4 years ago, going back and rereading that, it's like still an epiphany for me. It's still an epiphany that I never mattered, and that's something that I wish I had realized all along.
Well, you matter to us, Iman, and we really appreciate you coming on to the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you having me.
Lock your doors.
Are we going to say a little outro now?
Yeah. We're going
to...
stay alert.
Stay alert. Lock your doors.
And always listen for the knock.
Always listen for the knock.